started? I'm sure you want me to.
You go ahead.
Okay. Great. Good afternoon. Really excited to kick off our Finance and Administration Committee. So I'd like to welcome everyone. We are live over YouTube. The Board of Regents just had an incredible tour as part of our wrap-up of our Student Affairs Committee. It's so great to be able to leave the boardroom and actually be on campus and be able to see the services that we're offering students. And now we are going to dive into a really significant amount of work that's been done. And I'm excited to have Associate Vice President for Finance, Matt Skinner, who will be leading and really working through most of this agenda with me and various other individuals that will be part of the next couple hours. I invite you to feel free to get up, get a snack, but we are going to move through this. So in order for us to stay on schedule, I want to make sure that we are making it through our content. And we have a couple presenters that will be calling in that we want to make sure that we're able to meet and accommodate their schedules as well. So with that, I think first up, we are trying to focus our agenda in this committee because this committee often has a pretty significant amount of work. First and foremost on our future action items, and then we'll spend time reviewing those items that you are already familiar with and that are more informational. So the first part of our agenda will kick off with an item that actually Regent Shetler already spent a little bit of time in the strategic committee speaking a bit to, but let's kick it off with the WSU Pullman, Bowling College of Engineering and Architecture, Schweitzer Engineering Hall Design Phase Approval. In addition to Associate Vice President for Finance, Matt Skinner, Associate Vice President for Facilities, Olivia Yang, is with us as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Regent Shower. Good afternoon. We have a full crowd here for Finance Committee. Of course,
It's the fun topic.
For all
They
the fun
thought you were
happenings.
handing out money.
Or they're here to protect their money.
Ouch. Well, we'll be seated now. I want to recognize Dr. Shelley Presley from the Boiling College. She's the Associate Dean for Student Success. She's joining us today as we talk about this great new facility that we're designing to be able to provide any questions or perspective on programmatic student success and those benefits. So as Regent Shower said, this will be a future action item to seek approval from the board to proceed with design phase of the design build process. Total cost not to exceed $4.8 million. And we'll fund that $4.8 million cost right now with donated funds that have already been received. So they're cash on hand. Before I turn it over to Olivia to talk a little bit about the project timeline and the approach, we even have some slides to show here. Just want to talk a bit about the funding. This is pretty unique funding for WSU. In my opinion, it's the largest public-private venture we've done on a capital building. The funding plan calls for $40 million in donated cash funds from donors, plus $40 million in state capital appropriations to support the project. So both of those streams of revenue are really empowering and enabling to make this building come together. So Olivia, would you like to go?
Yes,
We have
thank
your
you.
pictures right here behind you.
Well,
Okay.
thank you. Can you all hear me? Supposed to use my inside
Speak
voice.
up a little bit.
Outside voice, apparently.
That's right.
So as Matt said, we're here for the design phase approval, which is the first major activity for this first building that the Boylan College believes anticipates will be a multi-year, multi-building modernization of their teaching and research facilities in the Boylan Engineering. So as Matt said, this is really a 40 donor fund, 40 million donor fund plus 40 from the state. You've seen the state request previously. We'll touch on it again later this afternoon for the state capital request. So what we're doing is because interest is in putting as much of the money towards the building as possible. we are looking closely at the cash flow and authorizing contract work as the cash comes up. If you look at the schedule, you'll see that we have 4.8 in cash. We will be designed for that. And assuming you will consent to the future action and the approval in November of the design phase, we will then start the procurement for design build. And that will launch us into doing design. And hopefully we will get about 40 million from the state, and we will then move into construction. You might see here that this is a rendering of the overall master plan for all of the Hoyland College improvements. The frame of reference is actually Carpenter, which is in white. And then you have the Schweitzer Hall. There, several other buildings are being planned. And I believe the college is working very hard to raise money for combined building. And-
Olivia,
Yes.
since I don't recognize anything in schematic, where is?
Yeah, thank you.
Oh.
Just give us context to this campus where we're looking at.
These are clearly all engineering majors and they were here, so.
Was the engineering professor?
No.
Well,
And where did the propeller heads go?
You could use roughly where the president's house is as a way to,
actually, yeah, because the president's, chancellor's house
chancellor's house, sorry.
is over here. This is the road that would lead to the chancellor's house, Spokane, and this is the road that is college, actually leads you to Rainy Park and the steam plant. Rainy Park where the Winter Festival was recently, and if you keep going up, then over here is actually Terrell Mall. So we're downhill from Terrell Mall. One of the objectives was to kind of bring the campus closer to Terrell because that's kind of the center of gravity. And so this is not just to modernize all the facilities, but to bring a connection back to the campus. Mike, if there are no questions,
It's currently a parking lot, right?
yes, and there's a question of the parking lot.
Yeah, this is on the parking lot right across the street from Daddy Hall. And I think that you might get some pushback from faculty, students, staff. We're thinking that you're just stealing parking from the campus. And I don't think a lot of people know or understand that when you build something on a parking lot, you literally have to purchase that parking lot from transportation services. So if we can kind of calm the waters on this a little bit and get out in front of this, if you could talk to how that doesn't mean that we're just eliminating parking, but how there could very well be plans for additional parking in the future, and how that might all work out. I think, like I said earlier, that could really help calm the waters before things get really stirred up.
Okay, and I know that's a very pertinent question from many of the people on campus. So normally what the transportation office does is if you build on a parking lot, you basically buy a parking stall because transportation is self-sustaining. So, you can't take the revenue away without making it whole. So you buy the stalls in the parking lot. The money goes into a pool that the transportation office manages. And we've been in discussion with them about ways to increase parking should we opt to build on parking lot. And some of the ideas that we've been talking about is that if you're, now that you're kind of calibrated to where we are, there are other lots here. And we would either improve the lots, which are, if they are a gravel lot, we could improve them to be a paved lot. And potentially there's been discussion of putting a single lid over the existing lots. So we're not talking about a parking garage per se, because that's way more expensive, but just put a lid so that you're doubling the capacity. And so those are the things that we're talking about with the transportation office, because we're aware that parking is a need. And in this case, because of where Daggy is and some of the other functions, it's not just the daytime need, but also some of the evening needs. So we're aware of that and we're talking about how to use it.
Thank you, Olivia, appreciate it.
Other questions?
Which engineering programs are we envisioning being here?
Thanks for the question. Yes, this is primarily going to be student success facilities. So we're going to be housing all of the tutoring services for engineering and architecture, academic advising, our clubs. We have close to 40 student clubs in the college that all are looking for a makerspace and access to that. So makerspace, currently we're talking about whether the School of Design and Construction Fab Labs plus the Engineering Frank Innovation Zone, the FIZ, will all be combined and fit within that space. Recruiting, this is going to be a showcase for how we attract new students to engineering, because they'll be able to see all these things in one place and access the projects that students are working on, whether it's clubs or capstone design projects that are using the maker spaces. Scholarships and recruiting is a big part of it. Our career services office will be in this space, which again is another, we do a great job of bringing in employers to recruit our students, and we want to have a showcase place where they can come and see and interview and meet with prospective future employees. Those are the types of facilities that will be in this. One other, some classroom space may be in there if there's room, and one of them would be the Engineering 120 classroom, which is our first year experience, first year engineering classroom, where we really are welcoming the first year students, helping them identify as an engineer or an architect, helping them recognize what the different disciplines of engineering look like, because many of them come in not real sure if they want to be mechanical or civil or chemical engineering. And so that Engineering 120 class introduces them to the different areas of engineering. So that would be in this building as well.
Where does your School of Construction Management lie? It used to be in a pretty dismal location. So is it integrated with all these disciplines?
Yep, and there's discussions about putting that in this space as well. Our career services office really is serving both construction management as well as engineering, and so we want to provide the space that is needed, because you're right, they're currently in disjointed spaces, and it makes it a challenge.
Yeah, and they're such integrated disciplines.
Yes.
Nothing computer science oriented though.
Well, yes, computer science is part of our college, so yes, absolutely. Will there be servers and computer labs in there? Probably not, but we're still at the anything's on the table phase right now, and anything could go in there. It's how do we prioritize what should be in there? Our hope is that we really want first year students to be in this building where they can see and visualize themselves as a third and a fourth year student, and they want to stay and they're retained. Because right now we're so spread out, a lot of the students don't see their counterparts in second, third, or fourth years. And so they don't recognize themselves as an engineer yet. And we want them to recognize themselves as an engineer or architect or a computer science student from day one. So that's the hope, that they'll have that opportunity to network and collaborate with senior level students, faculty, staff, because this will be the town hall, the center, the square of our college. That's the goal.
Just a clarification, Olivia, on your earned value chart, does that include all 4 of those
No,
buildings or just the one?
just the one for now.
Okay.
It's anticipated to be a total of 80 million for the building and the utilities. And so that's the first effort. Actually, the first effort is the design that we have cash for, and then we for the rest of the money.
Okay, excellent. This will be on the agenda. It is on the agenda for tomorrow for action. No, wait, what? Future action.
So we'll see it in November.
November, thank you. And a great model for the public-private partnership and the great support from Schweitzer. So, okay, all right.
Good night.
Yeah.
Make a comment?
Yeah, please.
This is one of those times to take a pause and really feel good about this. Dean Mary Rezac is not with us today. She's on a trip with the governor, and that's the reason she couldn't be here to talk about it. But we essentially raised half the cost of this building in 12 months. And the Schweitzer gift is important. We also have other gifts that are unannounced that will be here. And we are already talking to some prospective donors about the next building. So it's a pretty stunning achievement to think about how we did this and how we did it so quickly. Mary deserves a lot of credit. Her fundraising team have done an amazing job. But we need that showpiece so that when somebody goes, frankly, to the University of Washington and they're looking at their engineering program and see new state-of-the-art facilities and come up here and see stuff 40 years old, we lose a lot of those students because of that. And this, like Shelley talked about, this sort of town hall, modern state-of-the-art facility, you say this is what WSU engineering in Pullman is going to be really important for us to really attract those outstanding students in the state that want to study engineering and architecture. So it's a pretty stunning achievement. I'm sorry Mary's not here, but this is really a big step for the university. Thank you.
Absolutely. Much to be celebrated for sure. 12 months is pretty awesome. Matt, you're gonna stay close.
Yes, I'll be right here.
Yeah, why is that?
All right, awesome. Okay, so next on our agenda is university ethic policy. So Associate Vice President, Chief Compliance Officer, and Risk, Cheryl Camerzell, and Executive Director for Policy and Governance, Danielle Hess.
We thought everybody was here for ethics. But I'm just going to give an introduction to this and let Danielle walk you through the policy. But, you know, when I started in this position as the Chief Compliance Officer and to establish a compliance program, actually what it is in the Sentencing Commission and in all the best practices is a compliance and ethics program. So the first thing we did was move the ethics advisor into our unit in collaboration with Heather Lopez from Internal Audit. And now the next foundation is we have an ethics policy. With Danielle coming into her new role, we were able to move this forward quickly. Quickly once she got there. And it brings together several things that a lot of us have been talking about for a couple of years now, which is having a system-wide conflict of interest, conflict of commitment, and ethics policy that applies to our whole community. So it's an important achievement, I think, for our program. And I'm just going to turn it over to Danielle to walk you through some of the details of this policy.
Great, thank you. So we currently have a number of ethics-related policies scattered throughout the policy manuals and here and there. So this policy is really an effort to consolidate all of those various requirements, create an umbrella policy, kind of a one-stop shop, so people can go and they can see all of the various ethics rules, and they can link to all the existing policies and then see some examples of kind of how these play out in reality. So we've got that sort of consolidation section, and then we added a general conflict of interest section, a conflict of commitment section. We have a new section that's it's a safe harbor. I'll talk a little bit about that. It's an amendment to the state ethics law that just went into place in June. And we are also implementing an ethics training requirement for all WSU personnel, which is something that the Regents actually mentioned, I don't know, a number of years ago that was something that would be important. And so we're finally able to get that off the ground now. So the first section, again, is just the policy. It's organized around applicable provisions of state ethics law. It sets forth the rule and then common exceptions, and then it links to related WSU policies, provides a few examples. So for example, acceptance of gifts, use of resources, some of the sort of basic ethics provisions that are sort of fundamental to Washington state ethics law and applicable to all WSU personnel. So this is the umbrella section of the policy. Again, it consolidates existing ethics requirements, links to it as kind of the one-stop shopping section. we created a new section on conflict of interest. So previously, we have not had a general conflict of interest provision in WSU policy. We do have some specific conflict of interest provisions, for example, nepotism. We've got a process for that. Tech transfer, if somebody has a technology that they've developed at WSU and they have a private company and they want to commercialize it, we've got a lot of policy around that. But we have some pretty big gaps in our conflict of interest. As you know, the Board of Regents has a conflict of interest policy, it's Board of Regents Policy 1. So this particular section isn't going to apply to the Board of Regents. They've got their own policy and their own procedure that applies, but it's very similar. It mirrors the definition. Basically, a conflict of interest, a personal interest that's financial, familial, professional, or otherwise that may impair or reasonably appear to an objective outside observer to impair the independent, unbiased judgment of a university employee in the discharge of their responsibilities. So we've got the conflict of interest definition, and then we've got a process for disclosure and possible recusal, or alternatively, creation of a conflict management plan between that person and HRS and their supervisor, so that they can continue to work and manage the conflict. Similarly, we have a new section on conflict of commitment. It's also an area where we've had some gaps in policy in the past. This addresses situations where people might have outside employment, or maybe they hold a political office or something like that, that interferes with their ability to meet their primary obligations to WSU. So similarly, there's going to be a disclosure requirement and working with HRS and their supervisor to see if the conflict of commitment can be managed, and if not, a requirement that they either resign or cease the activity that's conflicting with their WSU employment. Another new section is the pre-approval process. And this is a really interesting provision. This is the new ethics law that just went into effect in June. And it's a pre-approval process and safe harbor for compensated outside faculty scholarship activities. Essentially, these amendments to the ethics law allow universities to develop an administrative process that creates a safe harbor for faculty engaging in outside activities related to scholarship. And this is one area of the ethics law that has never really applied very well to universities. We have this expectation that faculty engage in outside scholarship, and sometimes those activities are compensated. And yet the ethics law doesn't really allow for use, or in the past, it has not allowed for use of state resources in the context of those activities. And we've always made it clear that those are expectations. It's part of the person's job. But periodically, someone would get called out by the ethics board for something that is clearly perfectly legitimate. So this is kind of a nice exception that they've created. The policy makes it clear that outside scholarship activities, including compensated outside scholarship activities, are acceptable. It creates a voluntary pre-approval process when the scholarship activities are compensated. So that would be something like a commissioned art piece or a textbook for which a faculty member is going to get royalties. The process is going to work in conjunction with other current legal requirements and university reporting processes that are mandatory. Typically, as it is now, a faculty member cannot use university resources for compensated outside activities. This policy, as long as they have pre-approval, it is going to allow a reasonable use of university resources. And it's going to lay out exactly how that's going to work, which resources can be used and how. So I think it's going to be a real benefit and eliminate some of that gray area that's been problematic.
Suppose a faculty member, whether he or she uses university resources or not, writes a textbook, then requires the students to buy his or her textbook. How does that play?
Yeah, that's a common area. It's actually addressed in the faculty manual. And the faculty, correct me if I'm wrong, people who are more familiar with this than I am, but the faculty member cannot receive the royalties from that textbook. The royalties can go back to the university, to the department, or something like that, but the faculty member cannot personally receive it. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not the ethics advisor.
been a
Dave,
while.
do you know the answer to that? No. So I think anyway, there is a provision in the faculty manual that touches directly on that. It's a very common situation. In addition to that, there are a couple other new sections I just want to talk about very quickly. There's the mandatory ethics training requirement. That's going to apply to all volunteers, employees, and officers. It's going to apply to the Board of Regents. And so in conjunction with our revamping of the Regents onboarding process, there are going to be some additional training requirements, and the mandatory ethics training will be part of that, which is kind of nice because then discussions with the Attorney General's office can focus on activities specific to being a regent, and we will have already kind of covered Ethics 101. So I think that would be an important addition to the Regents onboarding in addition to ongoing training. And that's going to be an annual requirement. We've got a section on reporting ethics violations, and we have a section on the newly established ethics compliance officer, who will be a resource for individuals who have questions regarding their compliance with ethics laws and policies. So that's pretty much it. The policy is currently being vetted internally. It will be going to Faculty Senate soon, I believe. We will hopefully have a draft policy for the Regents review and a request that you approve it at the November meeting.
And it's here before you, in part because the new legislation requires Regents approval, actually. So.
I think I was the one who asked for this, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any questions? I'm assuming. Okay, all right. Matt, you're back up. All right, so next topic, marketing contract for Cosmic Chris.
Thank you. I want to recognize Dr. Scott Holbert joining today. You have several titles that I'll introduce you by, Scott. See if I can introduce you. So Scott is the Associate Dean for Research and the Interim Agriculture Research Director in the College of Agriculture, Human and Natural Resource Sciences on the Pullman campus, as well as the Co-Endowed Chair. One of these hats you're wearing today, so that's good. We're here to talk about a future action item which would authorize WSU to move forward with an extended marketing contract with Cosmic Crisp Apple. We're just in the early stages of negotiating that contract right now, but we anticipate that that would be a 3-year contract with a total cost not to exceed $7.5 million. A little bit of context and background for this from what we've talked about here a few years ago with the board. WSU is licensed intellectual property associated with this apple, and we make a royalty on every tree that's sold, as well as each box of apples. There's a bit of a catch there that the box of apples wholesale price needs to be over $20 per 40-pound box in order for that royalty to come our way. So with that in mind, back in January 2019, the board authorized the university to enter into a 4-year marketing campaign to promote the apple with a company called Proprietary Variety Management, or PVM. That contract was for $10.4 million. To date, WSU has collected dollars in royalties from that apple, and that current marketing contract expires at the end of this calendar year. So I think the kind of business concept we're thinking about here is with, and Scott will describe this in more detail, but with so much fruit coming off these trees, there's going to be a lot more supply in the marketplace over the next few seasons, and trying to think about how do we keep growing awareness and penetrate the market and keep demand strong for the apple. Our goal would be to keep that price per box up higher, so growers in the state of Washington benefit from that price, as well as WSU benefits from the royalty revenue. So I'll turn it over to Scott to provide some more programmatic.
Yeah, we're looking to extend the contract, well, make a new contract for 3 years, but at the same rate that we've been marketing with, about $2.5 million a year. The marketing's focused mainly on brand recognition, trademark enhancement, so people recognize the name of the apple and say, oh yeah, I wanted to try that. I saw some in social media about that. At this point, in the last 5 years, the Washington farmers have planted about over 19 million trees. So it's the fastest ramp up of a new apple that's ever been. They're doing this mainly by replacing old orchards of other trees that they have, ripping them out, and planting them in high density modern on trellises and everything. so that it's about 50 grand an acre to put these in, but it gets them into production in 3 years. Need a pretty good production on a 3-year-old tree, so that's what they're trying to do to recover their costs. The amount of fruit, like Matt said, is ramping up real fast. Fortunately, as these trees come into production, fortunately or unfortunately, it's a little bit scary. In the 2020 crop, the summer before last, we harvested about 500,000 boxes, a little over 500,000 boxes. Those boxes sold for $50 a piece average in 2021. So they're mostly sold the next year. Last summer, we picked about 1.5 million boxes, so like 3 times as much. And so far, they're still selling them this year, but so far the average has been about 36 bucks. So it's down quite a bit from $50, right? 3 times as many boxes to sell. Next year, or what have started picking now, we're projecting 4 million boxes. So another 3x, a little more than 3x increase. So we're really worried about keeping that price. 36 bucks isn't bad, but if it gets down too low, there's 2 problems really. If the farmers aren't making money, that's not a good thing, and we don't want to see that. Also, if the price goes low, it hurts our royalties too, and we like royalties too. So, and like Matt said, if it goes below, if a lot of apples sells lower than 20 bucks a box, then we don't collect any royalties. So, want to keep the price up. Coming up with $2.5 million a year has gotten a lot easier than it has been. In 2020, we spent $2.5 million, and we didn't have net royalties of $2.5 million. 2021, we just barely broke even, no distributions again. In 2023, next year, the first year of this new contract, we project that it'll only be 36% of our royalties to come up with that. And by 2025, it'll be less than 20%, we project. So as royalties increase, this becomes less of a big deal. $2.5 million. But it's been a struggle so far. Yeah.
You're done. I can wait till you're done.
No, I'm done. Yeah.
Okay. So it looks like Honeycrisp is your biggest competitor. Is that where?
Yeah, I think of the people that buy the premium apples, it's the big one.
What's their cost per?
So in the first year we tied with them for the top. I've been trying to find out where they're at this year. We were a tiny bit behind them in April. I can't really get caught up. Haven't been able to get caught up on what has happened between now and April. I think we've fallen lower. I think they're going to be higher than. We may finish a little bit above 36 bucks because the apple prices are pretty good right now in the stores. Cosmic Crisp is still. If you bought one lately, it tastes just like it did 8 months ago, and it's not picked this summer yet.
Not only that, but I just love the fact that you can cut it, sit it out on a platter, and it doesn't brown.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, but that's a good point. Cosmic Crisp or Honey Crisp is something we need to get more shelf space, more of their shelf space, and their volume has gone down this year. I don't think, and their price has gone down a little bit. It's going to take time, but the shelf space we need is other apples shelf space. There's other new apples, but they're pretty smaller in terms of volume. But they're in the same position we are. They're growing. They're not growing as fast as we are, but they need to advertise too. Good question.
Sorry, I guess I'm really slow this afternoon. I'm trying to understand who is really influencing supply and demand. Who's got the source of trees? And are we intending to try to influence supply and demand to preserve prices, or I'm trying to understand
Good question.
what's going on?
Yeah, with these new club varieties like jazz or rocket or something like that, they control all that. And they control how much gets planted. They're part of a club, and they make these decisions. We release it and the farmers grow it, and the first year they planted 600,000 trees. That was every piece of wood they can get. And the second year they planted 6 million, and we were just thinking, oh my God, here we go. There's nothing we can do about it. And then they planted 4 million again the next year, and 3 million the next year. Finally, we're down to 1.5 million last spring, and we're kind of going, phew, But we can't control supply. We can only try and increase demand as much as we can. So, well, right.
Well, I've been looking for gift boxes for Cousin and Chris, and there's only one source in the state that will ship around, and so at least that I've found more opportunity.
Yeah.
Any other questions? This is a future action item for November. So the intent is to increase demand. Marketing contract.
So I guess the question is a little bit, is this a tried and true path? Because you could also say the farmers are on the same side as we are, in the sense that they also have an interest in creating more demand. And they created, not we, have created this crazy supply situation. And so the demand side may be taken care of by, if we take care of the demand side, will they just keep increasing supply? Because, so are we sort of, in that, I forget which Disney movie it is, where, we're filling the buckets that can't be filled or whatever. But the, who's that little character? I don't know. I don't have little kids, but anyway, that movie. And instead, could we keep our $7.5 million and just let them do what they're gonna do, which is whatever they're gonna do, and we end up in the same place, but with $7.5 million. I guess I just asked that question, whether you thought that through, whether you've been down this road before in this works, or whether so we don't have our fingers on all the dials.
Yeah.
To Jeanette's point.
Yeah. They also advertise. They do it differently than we do. If you ask any of them, they would tell you that I'm not advertising right. I should be making displays in the stores and, pretty boxes, and I should have somebody standing there handing out slices and stuff. We're not doing that. That's what they're supposed to be doing. They are doing that. So we're just really trying to increase name recognition nationally and internationally too. So nobody's going to do that. It's not their thing to. If they have a contract with Walmart, they only care about those Walmarts and that state. And having people look at their display and buying apples. So
I get that, but it's just because we only make money above a certain box amount, but they make money, they have, since they've already got the sunk cost, if they've got the dollar, it's just the economics, the incentives are completely different.
People misunderstand me a lot in this. We get paid nothing if the box doesn't sell for $20, but if it sells for 21, we get 4 3/4% of that 21. So it's not like we don't get paid for the first 20. We get 1% of every box that sells above $21.
I was just gonna add, I do think, Heather, that's a great question though, and it's something as we start to negotiate the contract, we are looking back at the numbers, trying to see make sure there was a reasonable return. And I think you point to one of what I call both the business opportunity and the business challenge. it's hard to know what the exact right answer is, and I think you pointed to it. If you do nothing, does the market just kind of take care of it and we're okay? Or do we need to provide some of that brand awareness to keep it moving along? It's a perfect question.
I'm not sure we can actually control enough to control our own fate with spending.
Brett, and then John.
This is kind of piggybacking on the door Heather opened. I was going to start with, we've talked a lot about land grant mission today. And language in the strategic plan. And several years ago, President Schultz introduced a pretty good read of land grant institutions in the future. He even had the author of the book on campus. But I don't see this contract fitting with the land grant mission, the way it's structured. Since Heather opened the door to structure, that's where I view land grant institutions should focus on research and putting knowledge and technology in the grower's hands, not oil. That's what Monsanto does. Monsanto pet varieties. Monsanto sells seeds and clips and royalties for as much profit as they can make. Land grant colleges should operate on the social license and gain the public support. As our strategic plan said, engagement of the communities served. And royalties in this day and age may be a bit of a reality, but they're kind of like what we talked about at breakfast, the name, image, and likeness type thing. So how could we manage some of it differently? I've looked at some of our peer institutions. They handle this instead of private contracts. Use a foundation which has transparency and engagement with the community. Serve according to our strategic plan. Wisconsin's been doing that for something like 100 years. Kansas State does that. Oklahoma State does that. Colorado State does it quite successfully. And because they do it that way, they have great support of the community served because engagement is sought out. There's transparency and the royalties stay in the community and everyone benefits. It doesn't go, instead of like Monsanto having a big hand in your pocket taking royalties, even if royalties are collected, it stays within the land grant community. That's the direction I want to see go. So I voted as an exception last time for contract one. I won't vote for it again unless I have some assurance that we're making an exception for apples, not setting a pattern for everything else. So no one's surprised. Unless full up.
Thank you, Brett. Appreciate the perspective. I think there's a lot there and interested in other feedback as well. So John, you had a comment you were going to make.
Well, I had a question, actually.
Oh, okay.
Question. So I'm curious, I don't know anything about the apple market. I'm curious what a box of Red Delicious or Gala or Pink Lady sell for versus Cosmic Crisp or any of the new apples. I'm just curious. Because it seems to me that maybe there is an incentive to the farmers to actually get the price. If a price of box of apples is $20, 18, 19, I don't know what it is. If they get it down there, then they don't have to pay us anything.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah, so the cultivar licensing committee, a bunch of growers and packers who help us plan these contracts and pick a commercialization partner and decide how we're going to do royalties and things. Set that $20 is at that time, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, that was a point where they weren't making money at 20. That's what they figured about $20. Because, you know, it costs a lot of money to pick apples and chip them, or store them on your store. Now I think it's actually a little higher than that. And there's talk of, well, I've had suggestions. It's like, hey, maybe you ought to move that bottom line up. But, you know, the reality of it is when we start a commercialization process and then change courses midstream and start doing something different, that's what gets us in trouble. So I think we try and, like the WA2 lawsuit, you know, I think, you know, what we need to keep doing is listening to the growers and on the cultivar licensing committee. It's a big committee. And how do you guys want us to commercialize this? How do you want to do this variety? If we just let every farmer grow it and call it whatever they want without a trademark or anything, that's WA2. It was a total flop. Great apple, but just a total flop. We lost money on it quite a bit. And nobody made money, not yet.
Are there other questions or comments? I'm hearing there are a couple of questions, and so I'll try to think through, maybe Matt, we can follow up with some responses to some of the Regents' questions. But I think at this point, we're not asking for action right now. The action would be in November, and I think the comments and feedback has been helpful. So anything else before we move on? This one.
I just want to say that I normally would do something like this just completely for you guys, because I don't think this group prize is just sort of a original level discussions, and these tend to be such high profile things and get a lot of attention, and so I think it's important it's a branding thing for us. So I just think it's important that we get through it to do it in an intelligent way. And it sounds like you're exploring different models for how to do this right. Brad obviously has a strong point of view on one. It is multiple philosophy, and then there's some business model questions as well. Yeah, I think we're just trying to ask you some of those questions along the way. But it's you know, we don't want to be in the weeds on all this stuff. But I think this one is just, you know, front page worthy. So, and there's been enough noise around apples that we should be careful.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate the questions and feedback because we're at a stage where we can take that all into consideration at an early stage in the process.
Yeah, and if you want me to draft some written answers to anything, I'm happy to do that too.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, let's keep moving through our agenda. WSU Pullman Taylor Sports Complex Design Phase Approval. Joining Olivia and Matt is Pat. All right.
Hey, Pat.
Oh.
So we haven't seen Pat in person in a while.
Yeah.
Virtual 3D.
Nobody's playing a game anywhere right now?
Tonight. We have
Soccer.
Colorado
Well, there we go.
Soccer.
Okay. But it's here.
It's here.
Well, there you go.
You just got back from Madison, didn't you, like yesterday?
Yeah.
They were partying.
Yeah. Asking them to go over.
Well deserved. All right. I'll let you take it away. Matt, you just left.
Well, thank you. So this is a future action item for design of the Taylor Sports Complex. Design cost not to exceed $2.4 million. And that will be paid with cash donations on hand. And I thought we have some more information on funding of the project we could talk about, but maybe turn over to Pat first to share your vision.
Yeah, and just to provide a little context, good to be with everyone in person here. So this football season actually marks the 25-year anniversary of our 1998 Rose Bowl. And at the conclusion of that Rose Bowl, Coach Price was made a promise that we would have an indoor practice facility. So we went through a campaign to try to build an indoor. We were fortunate to have a handful of Cougs that donated to the project, but we fell short of the goal. So what came was what you see today, the air-supported structure, the bubble, whatever you want to call it, and the life expectancy of the bubble was really supposed to be 14 or 15 years. So fast forward to 2022, a lot has changed. I think you spent time with 3 of our coaches this morning in Chancellor Chilton's presentation, and you guys, it's no secret, we sponsor some of the top varsity sports in all the country. The coaches you spent time with this morning, you have a first-year women's tennis coach that guided one of our tennis players to the farthest Sweet 16, I think, in school history. You got a soccer coach who's literally one of the top 10 soccer coaches in the country and has taken our school to a college cup. You got a women's basketball coach, I think Cammy was there this morning, that has taken our program to back-to-back NCAA tournaments. So that is the caliber of athletic program that we have today. Plus, the environment has changed significantly. This week is an example of when we would need an indoor practice facility. With air quality has actually become a bigger issue than it was 25 years ago. This facility in itself impacts football, men's and women's track and field, women's soccer, and baseball probably the most, because they're the ones that would use it predominantly throughout the year. But all of our teams ultimately would use it. So one, I want to thank President Schultz. When I got here, we talked about priorities, and this was, I mean, didn't have to convince him. He knew this was a priority. I know Mitch Straub is here. He leads our fundraising team, and we've had extraordinary success. We've had a great number of Cougs that have stepped up and have contributed. We have over 27 million in cash and pledges. Over 2/3 of that is in cash as we speak right now. Our fundraising staff has worked really hard to get us to this point with this and a bunch of other projects, but it is really a reflection of the support that athletics has and this university has from a wide spectrum of donors all across Washington State. So we're appreciative of the Regents for giving this consideration for this long-awaited and necessary facility. So that's back to you.
The approach here is similar to what we talked about for Boylan. We're asking for design approval. And that would allow us to begin the solicitation for design builder, which is the way we've been getting our construction work done. And so after the November action, hopefully that we will grant approval, we will begin our solicitation, which takes about 3 months or so. And once we have a design builder on board, we'll start design and then watch as the cash catches up and then construction. The location, presumably everybody knows where the level is kind of hard to miss. Well, if you ever go to Ferdinand's, you'll see it. And it's long past its. It needs to be like, it needs to be retired. Exactly. So happy to take questions.
What's the total cost of this facility?
We've raised over 27 million. We believe we've made some compromises relative to the needs of football, women's soccer, and track and field primarily. It won't be, as we sit today, and it'll be at roughly 85 yards worth of football fields, running lanes, and jumping pits for track.
So maybe just a question. In my past life, I was a facilities engineer. And one of the things that I've learned about Olivia and the approach of the facilities team here is the innovative, efficient, effective project management around our facilities. And so I just wanted to maybe ask you, when it comes to these big capital projects, are you training the next generation of people to approach projects really well? You know what I mean? I'm not an eloquent speaker like everyone else, but I really am curious. It's a different angle to the subject at hand, but we've got to train the next generation on managing these big capital projects.
No, absolutely. And it's somewhat tangential, but, and I'll try not to go on and on because it's one of my favorite subjects. We do train, we actually have kind of what we call the junior PM, and we couple them with the more senior people so that they can watch and see, and we pick projects that are designed to help them grow, typically small projects because they have a shorter life. The other aspect, which might not surprise you, is that in a way, even if we didn't have that model for succession planning and growth, we are forced to it because the youngsters are the ones we can afford to hire. And so for many reasons, we hire younger PMs, which is fine because then you don't have a lot of bad habits also. And then we train them up and we slowly grow them. We have quite a few that are really up and coming. We're happy that, things are lining up.
Well, it's germane to the long-term success of some of these
Yes.
higher projects.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Just curiosity. Thank you.
However, we are not suggesting that you're retiring.
Yeah.
You're 50 or whatever. Don't get any ideas.
I hope to retire the day before people start saying, why is she still here?
We will never say that. Yeah.
Other questions, comments?
No, I just have Regent Shore. Just want to thank Pat and his team and Mitch. As we do more of these gift funded projects, we're trying to build some standard financial review processes that we just repeat every time. And we've done it on this project. Appreciate them. With Mitch, we're in there looking at spreadsheets, figuring it all out, and really the right way to do these gift funded projects. So appreciate their help.
I'd just say on behalf of the board, Mitch and Pat and your whole team, thanks for making this a little more palatable for us to be able to do. I mean, I'm sitting here 2 years ago when we were trying to figure out how we were going to fund some of these projects. And, there's a lot of accountability that you guys have taken to pay for these to come forth. And I know, Kirk, that has, been a edict of yours too, but it's hard work to raise this money piecemeal at a time. And so thank you, because it certainly makes it exciting and a little easier to say, let's get this done.
I also want to give you kudos for this morning. We had a great time with the Title IX celebration, and it reminded us all how much the athletic program produces great humans that get to make a big impact in the world and the workplace, and particularly the women are making a big impact in the world and in my world of corporate America. So thank you.
Thank you. I think it's notable as well to point out, it's buried in here, but we have almost 20 million in cash today.
Yeah, right.
Pledges we hope are coming
On
in.
hand.
So doing capital projects where you've got that much cash on hand also is pretty stunning. So we've had a lot of donors that Pat and Mitch have talked to and said, hey, I appreciate the pledge, but can you accelerate that so that we get more cash in to be able to do the project? So this really is fantastic. This is a far cry from the athletic program 5-6 years ago and where we were on trying to do projects. So congrats.
I think that this also speaks to the team approach. So I was writing down, as Olivia was saying, as cash catches up, design and construction. So the symbiotic nature of the roles that each of you are playing and ensuring that we're staging all of this is just so critically important. So I think we are all so pleased. So thank you for all of the work. This is very exciting, and we couldn't do it without the support of our donors too, recognizing the importance to our students. So thank you. All right, so that concludes our future action items. So that is our agenda for what is scheduled for our November meeting to take action on. So with that, I'm gonna transition into information items, which we have Pat and Matt, who will stay as we do our athletics budget review. I want to make sure that I'm being really clear. This is our typical review process, and so we want to make sure that we're staying focused on what this agenda item is. And so with that, I will pass the ribbon to you.
Great. Well, I can start with the FY23 budget update. We provided that in the information item. That's the same budget that the board approved last spring, both the budget for the current fiscal year 23, as well as that 5-year projection. Working with Pat's team, no significant changes to that approved budget at this time. Of course, we continue to actively work with them to look at the major sources of revenue, ticket revenue, donations, conference distributions, and then watching expenses. So we'll be back at the November meeting with another update, maybe know a bit more about how things look at that stage of the football season.
September is always the easiest budget update, because there's really not much happening today. But I did want to make note of a couple things. One, we have a new CFO in athletics, Brent Meyer. Brent just joined us last week, so Brent, so he will work directly with Matt and his team, and that relationship has been really cohesive since I've gotten here, and really beneficial to athletics. The other piece too, I just want to mention in the materials is a mention of our champions complex. What that complex basically is, we have 12 million in cash and pledges for that project. It is critical infrastructure for our student athletes. So it's an academic center, mental health support, nutrition, and professional development. So the wonderful thing in athletics right now, we have the people in terms of staffing that work extraordinarily hard to build programming, mentor, and guide and develop our student athletes. And as you guys see, we just have an extraordinary collection of coaches that prioritize that. But we need the facilities to help modernize where we're at. So that's also in your materials today. And just a quick snapshot of the effect of the benefits of athletics and what happened over the weekend. I think many of you saw we had almost 4 million TV sets or viewers of our upset win on the road at Wisconsin. It's the 4th highest rated game over the weekend, the highest rated Pac-12 game. Within the first 24 hours we got back to campus, we moved $17,000 to ticket inventory. And you guys know the feeling on campus or in and around the system when any of our programs, but football uniquely gets such a high profile win, just so meaningful. So we're excited about this weekend. We have we're expecting a good crowd, but the schedule's mapping out. We have some high quality opponents, but Coach Dicker has mandated we just go 1-0 and focus on next week or this weekend. So jumping on that. So yeah.
I have a question, Pat, and I don't know quite how to frame this, but after this morning's visit with these exceptional coaches, we spent a lot of time talking about facilities and the physical infrastructure. But those facilities are as good as the people that are, kind of bringing in the talent and so how are we doing, and how does it work that we are ensuring that we're taking care appropriately from a compensation standpoint of our coaches and that coaching staff and looking at that, across the board with women and some of those amazing women coaches that you have in there at this time, but just across the board, because it's something that we don't talk a lot about. Do you fundraise for that kind of thing? How does that work?
Well, it's young. It's the great challenge of hiring extraordinary coaches. The market is in their favor. The whole country watches and sees who has successes. As we go down this path, we've tried to lock in our coaches on longer term deals. I think just this past summer, our women's rowing coach, our volleyball coach, both men's and women's basketball, we extended them out 1 year. So typically we like to keep them either at 4 or 5 years on the out. We also recognize, and both basketballs are probably the best example, is success will come and they will have opportunities. Our hope is we profile coaches that there are other reasons in which why they fit Washington State or fit Pullman a little bit, where that would cause some pause, but they're all good problems to have if our coaches are winning and the market is calling them. And but we've had we've had great I've had we've worked hard to have long-term plans with all the programs. Even in basketball, we're starting a feasibility study for what the next phase of the arena is. We need to talk, what's the next phase for women's tennis. So we have plans for everything. I think we're very comfortable in the fundraising that we've done to date relative to the donors that we've communicated with, what's on the horizon for Washington State. But it's going to take everything. It's fundraising. It's this next phase of our television contract with the Pac-12. It's ticket sales through football. It's the opportunities that we have for ticket sales and men's and women's basketball. It's continued corporate sponsorship. So it's all the levers that we're going to have to keep pulling to keep generating dollars.
I have a question. So, watching the game last week, and what was it? I don't know, 70,000 people there or something?
85.
Okay, yeah. a heck of an atmosphere.
It's quiet at the end.
Not my house.
Except for one part of the stadium.
My question is, how do we get people to come to our home games? You know, I mean, we have a huge victory with that.
Yeah.
And we seem to do well as in television. So, football players and stuff like that. How do you translate to true? Is that fair?
Yeah, winning does impact ticket sales. I mean, we have a pretty robust marketing plan for all of our sports, but primarily football, men's and women's basketball are our three economic drivers. You know, our capacity rate is always going to be one of the higher ones in the Pac-12 in terms of fill rate. So, and the schedule is friendlier in a year like this, in even years when we have a rival game at the end of the year. So timing, scheduling, you know, there is a commitment that has to be made to the Pullman. So, you know, there are things I've learned that having, you know, back-to-back home games does have an impact on us. But winning, you know, typically does override everything. So, and this year we did, you know, we headed into this year worried about the economy because we felt like when you looked at the numbers, you could sense there was an impact coming. But our fans rallied Idaho. We had our second best opening home opener with Idaho here. So I think that it's kind of an indicator of where our fan base is at.
I think, you know, we've talked a little bit in our planning about what we can do and what we can't do. I think I want to emphasize with intercollegiate athletics that we had to get ourselves to a balanced budget situation. And the reason I mentioned that is, sure, we would love, Pat would love to compensate some of our coaches more and those kind of things, but you can't be doing that if you're spending more than you've got coming in. And so I know we're at a critical time. The next couple of years, we've had this success, we've hired well, but the fact of the matter is there are some constraints there. I mean, we could just be spending all this money, and at that point, you've got an internal rebellion over how come they get to spend that way and nobody else does. And so the next couple of years that we have success, and those media contracts are going to be really important to provide, you know, thank God we're flat now. So if you get new money, you're not ditching necessarily into an annual funding hole because you've been disciplined to get it where it needs to be. But that's clearly going to be, you know, what we've got to work on, I think, over the next couple of years will be as these coaches get more people calling them at the end of their season, can we do the compensation that's appropriate within a balanced budget and doing it in a way that we operate the rest of the university. So not trying to be a downer, it's just taking a long time to get here.
Yes.
That's the reality of where we got to operate in. We can't just pay a particular coach $5 million a year and go, well, we'll just figure it out. And that's what got us in a hole to begin with, is that kind of decision making. I just want us to be careful.
And it's your leadership that has put us on a path with a great team to stay very cognizant of ensuring that we don't go down that path again. And at the same time, I think such success in strategy and fundraising. So it's a both and approach. So, but I think it's a really good point.
The no parentheses thing feels really good.
Well, just one more note about fundraising. It's something we're really proud of, and it's a real testament to Mitch and his team. But I know when Kirk arrived, I mean, we were averaging between 10 and 12 million a year in fundraising. We just had back-to-back years of at least 27 million in fundraising. Like to go from where we were at to where we're at now is a testament to our donors, like, first and foremost, because they're the ones who are opening their hearts and their checkbooks to support Washington State. But we have a team of committed professionals that are out there engaging with our alums and our supporters, and it's showing up significantly.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I need to keep us moving forward. So I'm going to kind of pick up our clip a little bit after this next really important item, which is our financial statement audit results. I am really proud of what Matt is going to share here with Molly. And so we are going to talk a little, no pressure, I saw your face, Molly. Come on up. We have our audit team here, and Matt will do an introduction there is tremendous amount of work that has been done to get to this point. And so we will have them do the presentation and then we'll open it up for questions. Hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at the audit report and results.
So yes, I want to thank Molly Gold, Executive Director and Controller for Accounting Services joining us, and then Jody and Kristen.
So I'm Kristen Diggs. I'm an audit partner out of our WSU office with my family.
And I'm Jody Doherty. I'm also an audit partner out of our WSU office.
And I'm in the safest seat in the house now with 2 external accounting firms on each side, which is great. And thank you for being here. Appreciate you making the trip up. So I guess I just want to start off by just recognizing this is a bit unusual. It's now September, and we're talking about fiscal year 21's year-end financial results. So a year later, and I just want to recognize that from everyone. This is not where we anticipate being next year or the years after, but really tremendous hard work by many people to get us to this point. I want to call out Molly and her team for just tireless effort over the last 18 months to take on. We knew we were taking on a lot. Not only did we change our accounting systems, we said, let's get new auditors at the same time. And we knew what we were going for, but we wanted to start with a clean slate, start new systems, new auditors, new perspective on everything, and then we'll build up from there. So appreciate that, everybody's help on that. As we look at the results of the fiscal year 21 audit, the good news is we have a clean and qualified opinion. And Jody and Kristen will take opportunity to speak to those in more detail. As you look through the packet, though, I do want to call out that Eide Bailly, over the course of their review, found 3 areas that they consider to be material weaknesses or findings. I just want to point those out transparently at the beginning, talk a little bit about those and the action steps we're taking already to address those, and then I'll turn it over to our collection, Mike Bailey, to do their due diligence report to the full board. So the first finding was related to what we call year-end procedures, and this is going to get a little bit accounting here. Sorry about that, everybody. This is when we're preparing the financial statements, there was an insufficient review of the layers of the financial statements before they came forward to the auditor. And that's something that we agree with. We were understaffed and running a little bit behind on time, but we have good procedures in place now to get multiple reviews on those financial statement balance before the audit starts, which will be great. The second, I'm going to jump around if that's okay. The third finding, if that's okay, we'll go out of order, was related to the Student Book Corporation. And this is one where, with the help of Eide Bailly, we discovered that there was a better way to account for the Student Book Corporation. And it was different than how that has been done for a really long time here. And so we made that change to show that as a component unit of the university, is what we call that in governmental accounting. And that change is in place, and we have reviews in place now to look at our related entities and make sure that we have them disclosed properly in financial statements. Finding number 2 is one that we want to spend the most time on for discussion, and that is we did have a finding about inability to reconcile bank accounts after the implementation of Workday, and that's one that we take very seriously. That's really important to us as a university, and that was a problem area for us. Let me talk about some of the work we've done to try to address that since we went live with Workday and since the audit happened. We brought together a cross-functional team with individuals from Molly's team in accounting, from our Treasury Investment Group, as well as our Information Technology Systems Group and our Workday team. They have reviewed the entire configuration and our needs. They've come up with a list of prioritized issues that need to be addressed. They've put one bucket, which is a quick win bucket that we feel like we can address and start taking care of on our own. We have a set of issues that are more complex that we've already engaged an outside banking expert who's here with us. I'm starting to work on resolving those 2 things. So we're really tackling both the low-hanging fruit and more complex things at the same time. We're making great progress already with that. Already much more reconciliation happening than we've had in the last 2 months, and we feel really good about our progress there. On a personal note, I'd say why this is painful, and we never want to have a finding about reconciling our bank accounts. We don't want that kind of finding. It's nice to walk through Molly's shop and not see ticker tape running out of a 10-key machine out the door as someone's trying to reconcile the bank account. And that's the way we worked up until we went live on Workday. And so we really are embracing a new way of managing our finances and managing our bank accounts. That includes real-time feed from our banks with those transactions right into our accounting system where we can match. Some of the improvements there, we've already built 120 automated, what we call first notice rules in Workday. It takes routine transactions from the bank, matches those as a potential match, and starts the reconciliation. That's one of the secrets to getting this to be automated, is we've got a lot more of those rules in the system. So just want to recognize everyone for their hard work. Let me pause there and see if there's questions about any of those findings, in particular the cash finding, and then certainly we'll turn the time over to Jody and Kristen to give their report.
Let me just make a couple of comments. So in my role, I have met with Bailey 3 times now, and we've talked through this. I have multiple notes, including comments about Bailey's experience working with our WSU team as having been awesome, and their willingness to be responsive. I've also got some really incredible notes about how Molly and Matt and Stacy and the entire WSU team have done the right thing. More time, more work, more process, but in responding to and taking all of these findings seriously to put in place the system that we need in order to move forward. So as you walked up, and I'm saying just kind of how proud I am, it is a huge effort to implement Workday. It's a huge effort to implement a new auditor. To do both at the same time is just a little nutty. And so I think huge praise for all of the work that you've done, because it is really important. And actually, it's just tremendous for WSU to have the opportunity to really start fresh. And it is a really great opportunity, but it required a lot from your teams to make this happen. So thank you. I think this is a really.
And I would just add quickly, now we're in FY22 audit season. We're just starting, and we feel so much further ahead. The team is feeling much more confident. They're smiling when I see them, and so ready to take this on. I think that's a really positive sign for the year to come.
Great. How is it working with your financial institution? Because as a partnership with this reconciliation and just the transition to Workday.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Anything specific to our banking partner?
Yeah.
Very well. I mean, it has really cool technology behind to do the things Matt was talking about. And so we were able to take feeds and data from them to do automated reconciliation to avoid our ticket situation. Yeah.
And as you'd be familiar, the financial institutions are used to working with their clients that way. We are just catching up. So part of our work has been talking to these partners about what they recommend. We've done listening sessions with other research universities that are on modern systems to find out how they're building their processes and procedures. That's part of how we're building our plans from that feedback.
And I would just add quickly, we met with our colleagues at UW on Friday. They're going to Workday. And although they're Huskies, we're hoping to save them from some of our pain. We had a great couple-hour conversation to give them some tales from reality, help them out.
So one of the things that I was hoping to do was to make sure that we presented this so that you had the opportunity to have a conversation versus just get a report that had findings, because there's so much more context that I think is important than to just see that the university had some findings in the audit report. So are there any questions before we?
Yeah, so again, just to emphasize how incredible it was to implement both changes. Question on, have you completed the forensics on the reconciliation, or is that still unclear? Has it been resolved as to what happened and what was the magnitude?
Yeah, that's.
We were able to resolve it with it to the satisfaction that we had a finding, but we had an unmodified opinion. And so I don't know if we could quantify it into dollars, but I think Matt's talking about the efforts will assist us as we go forward to mitigating the impact we were seeing with the help of consultants and others on this. Thank you.
Is that helpful to your comments? Did we cover your question there?
Well, I think I'm hearing that you're fixing it for future, but, what you found is not yet.
Oh, yeah, we clean it all up as part of the cleanup. Cash will be reconciled all the way through across the board. We're just still in progress to getting that all done. And not that this feels any better, actually, what's ironic about it is the cash in the bank is higher than what we have in the books. So if you have to be in that situation, that's the right way to be, right? But we need to get that.
So typically, again, from for-profit world, when we have outside auditors, we would have an opportunity to meet with the auditors, with, management present, just to get like hey, is there anything you want to tell us? It's sort of the audit job to have that conversation. Is that appropriate in this context, or have you done that already?
I have met with them, yes.
Okay.
And
Independently.
yeah, I've met with them.
Okay, good.
I've met with them.
Okay, you've done your thing. You
Yeah,
asked more questions.
yes.
Okay.
And I do think that's appropriate. That's why we wanted them here. They can provide kind of their due diligence presentation if you'd like. It's very brief, and IBALE stands by questions.
And I think they should. I mean, this is appropriate. So this is kind of a lead-in context, but yes, I mean, I think you're here. I would really appreciate that.
Yeah, so if we could, I don't know if you want to give a presentation before we ask you the questions, but
Whichever you prefer. You want to ask them?
what do we have for time?
I would like for you to run through the.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
Great. All right.
Sure.
All right. Well, we've already done introductions, so I won't do that again. But as far as what the agenda is, we're going to go through basically our audit opinions that we provided on the report. So with the financial statement packet that you have, there are 2 audit reports in there. And then we also have another required communication that we have, what we call our AU 260 letter, but it's our governance letter. And so we'll kind of go through that. So in the audit report, like Matt talked about, it is an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. So basically, in our opinion, it says unmodified, it is a clean opinion essentially. And so based upon our procedures, there were a lot, we went through and we're able to get comfortable that the financial statements that you see are materially accurate. With that, it's not going to be absolute because we do apply materiality to it. We do select samples. We do a risk-based approach based upon our testing. And then based upon that, we're able to form an opinion. Within the opinion, there's also a paragraph that talks about required supplementary information. So in the financial statements that you have, after the footnotes, there's some additional schedules, and those are required supplementary information. And so those are basically, we look at them in relationship to the financial statements that you see. We read through it, we talk through management, make sure there's nothing that's going to contradict, but those include your management's discussion analysis, which is at the beginning of the packet, and then your schedules on pension, OPEB, are also included in the required supplementary information. So to kind of go through the audit opinion, so there's 2 opinions. So there's going to be the financial statement opinion, and then there's the other opinion where it's basically what we call our yellow book opinion. And so it talks about internal controls and everything. And so we don't go in and test internal controls, but if based upon our inquiries, based upon our testing and everything like that, if issues do come up, we do have the opportunity to mention them here. And if they rise to the level where some of these did, then we will mention them with that opinion as well. The other thing we wanted to note is the management is responsible for the financial statements. The financial statements that you were presented with, that was prepared by management. We went through and reviewed it, and based on our tests, and made sure we were comfortable with the numbers. And like I said before, an audit provides reasonable but not absolute assurance that the financial statements are materially misstated, or they are materially correct. We do not provide an assurance on regulatory compliance. And then an audit is not designed to provide assurances regarding internal controls. But if items come up, we will note those like we did with the findings that we came across. With that.
Oversight.
All right, so the other thing that I think is in your packet is we are required to communicate, because we communicate with management through the whole process. But at the end, we communicate with you, those charged with governance. And so this letter is our way of letting you know what went on during the audit and things that happened and that we wanted you to know about. So, the first part is very, sorry for me. It's very, hey, don't forget, this is our responsibility, this is management's responsibility, just as a reminder to you of what the audit is. And then we let you know, we remind you that your financial statements have significant estimates in them because they're just estimates, and what they are this year could be very different next year. So a couple that we bring to your attention is the allowance for uncollectible accounts related to the student accounts receivable. That's a guess, their best guess on what's collectible and what's not. So that's a significant estimate. Your participation in the state retirement plan, I mean, that number swings wildly from year to year, depending on how the market's doing. So that's in there. It's in there as a liability. It's just an estimate, and it could be very different a year from now. And same with the other post-employment benefits. So the benefits that you pay retirees, that number can change significantly every year because it is just an actuarially determined estimate. You do have an asset retirement obligation that's based on certain engineering reports, but still things happen, regulations change. It is just an estimate of how much it's going to cost to retire that asset at some point in the future. And then we also talk about lost revenues. Part of the funding that came out of all the COVID-19 money, the Higher Education Relief Fund, was the university was allowed to recoup some of that lost revenue that from being shut down and not having students living in your housing, not having students going to your games, not having games, all that lost revenue, the university was allowed to collect on. Of course, it's an estimate, the calculation, and so we just want to bring that to your attention that that's in there. It's reflected as revenue, but it is just an estimate. In this letter, we communicate with you if we've had any difficulties during the audit. We did mention, as Matt talked about, the implementation of Workday in the middle of a fiscal year did cause some issues, and it delayed the audit and the issuance of the financial statement. So brought that to your attention. We also bring to your attention any misstatements that we found while we were auditing that management corrected, and then misstatements we found that didn't rise the materiality of needing to be corrected. And so we let you know, we communicate to you what those misstatements were and the impact on your equity, your net position at the end of the year by them not being posted. If we had any disagreements with management, we would communicate that with you. We did not have anything to communicate there. And if we had consulted any other outside independent auditors, accountants, we would let you know that, and we did not have any to communicate with you. And then we let you know that in the audit opinion letter, you will see a section called emphasis of matter, and we bring certain things to your attention in that opinion letter that is in the financial statements. So one was the fact that we did have an adjustment related to the prior period adjustment that we had to post. The fact that we just make it clear that these are the financial statements of Washington State University and not the state of Washington. What was it?
SB84.
Oh yeah, there was an implementation of a new standard which brought some off financial statement activity, not previously reported into the financial statements based on this implementation of the standard. So that did change, some of the financial statements. It increased some of the balances. I think that was about it. Anyway, it's all in the opinion letter. So if you go look in the opinion letter, all of those things are pointed out to you. So we We just make you aware as those charged with governance, what's sitting in our opinion letter. I think that's it for that letter. So now, any questions for us?
Yes. So any concerns with the team in terms of depth, adequacy of staffing, morale, whistleblowing capability, any of the above?
I mean, so we were in auditing during COVID. So
you were seeing them on Zoom?
Yeah, we had a lot of Teams calls. But I think staffing, especially in the higher ed industry right now, is difficult. So retaining the staff, making sure you're able to keep them. All the different higher ed institutions are picking off, different people. So just making sure you have the right players in the right seats. So that's always a concern. It's hard to see what was COVID, what was system implementation, and what was staffing with all of it. I think implementing mid-year on the system implementation, they didn't have enough time under their belt to get to know the system before we come in and we start auditing it. And so with such a big change, there was a lot to work through and get through the audit.
We'd love to just throw ourselves in the deep end.
You might as well just rip off the Band-Aid and go for it.
Well, and it was a mid-year conversion.
Yeah.
So half the year we were auditing was under the old system and the other half of the year was under the new system. And I think Workday is a great product. It was just them learning how to use it and to go from a full cash basis. I mean, if you're from the for-profit world, you understand that there's a big difference between cash basis and full accrual. So whole mindset change, working through the different way the software did things. I think the team's great. Tammy on Molly's team works really hard, and she worked really hard to get everything to us, to figure everything out.
Over and get her in here. So
I know.
Thank her.
Yeah. That Molly has a great team. They may be understaffed, I don't know. They worked really hard to make all of this happen this last year. And not only that, but all the reporting upwards to the state as well, and trying to get that figured out while we were out there asking questions, while they were pulling things from two different systems, while they're trying to get the bank accounts reconciled. They worked very hard.
Any other concerns that you have mentioned that you'd like to mention?
No, there are
No
in the
concerns.
findings. So those are our major concerns.
What would you consider to be a success for this next year?
I'll start.
Go for it.
When they give us, from the balance sheet point of view, assets, liabilities, when they give us that they could tell us what makes up those balances, and they know it, they've reviewed it, and they're solid numbers. I helped on the balance sheet side of it, and Kristen helped on the income statement side of it. So, and I feel like they've got a much better grasp on what happened during the year. It's all in one system. There's no, just all the conversion entries that kept popping up in the audit is, trying to figure out if that conversion entry was right and what was the balance. So I think for me, a win would be they know exactly those ending balances and what's in it, and they can support it.
And we talked through too, we came out in June and said, okay, these are kind of the things that we're looking at. So if you guys could sit down and look at that, it might help resolve some of the items before we come in or looking at it to where we're not finding stuff that's going along. So, kind of to piggyback off of what Jody said, doing that, being able to have the capacity to do that review before we come out and actually understand the numbers, understand what changed, why it changed. That's all going to be important. So.
I think we've got a good plan. We've all met, we've all talked, we've got a plan in place to how to get through this year's audit.
Yep.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Is there any other critical questions? I have quite a few more agenda items, but this is our time directly with the auditor. So I really want to make sure that you have the time and space to ask those questions. We can move through the rest of the agenda at a quicker pace if need be.
Thank you very much. Well done, thank you.
Thank you. Kirk, anything you want to? Thank you for the extra time with me. So this is my first year in this role, and so I've appreciated the extra time asking questions. And Molly and Matt, thank you for all of your work, and a big thanks to your teams, and obviously to Stacy's leadership, even though she's not here. Really appreciate her.
I just love the finance team are the big risk takers.
Right?
It's interesting.
Okay.
Interesting organization.
It's a
you
flip.
got here,
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I am gonna need to ask that the folks that are next up, as much as I would not like for you to have to condense your presentations, I have 20 minutes left and I have multiple agenda items. So Heather, if you could come on up, and unfortunately, I think maybe 5 minutes or so, and I'm gonna need everybody to adjust their timing. So you could kind of think about how you might be able to give us the most important pieces. I will say, I really appreciate Heather also spends quite a bit of time meeting with me, and we meet one-on-one. While she works directly with Stacy, she also has reporting directly to the president, and then we have one-on-one time, just the two of us, and that's been really valuable. And so this is one of 2 times that she directly reports to the board. And so I hate cutting any of that time. My hope is you've had a chance to take a look at her report and her plan for this next year. So I'm sorry.
It's okay. 3 items in your packet, the end of your report. It's just a 1-page recap. I was trying to condense.
Thank you.
Yeah. I went back to prior years and saw that the end of your report and the audit plan, which are presented at the same meeting, have a lot of the same information. So just condensed it. So there's the table. We have the exit report from the statewide single audit and the findings at WSU, another audit. And then the fiscal year 23 audit plan. The highlights that I wanted for this group, because you do have a lot of materials there. There were some judgment decisions through fiscal year 22, especially with the nuttiness that was going on with Workday and financial statement auditor, and us learning Workday, and the university community learning Workday, not having direct assurance audits on the controls within Workday on a lot of the financial systems. That wasn't in the audit plan last year. It was more working with management on, while we were going through it, when we started doing tested transactions, if we saw any high-risk items, we would bring it to the attention of management and kind of walk through. And modernization team has been working with management throughout, even before transition, and are always like, not exactly reacting, but responsive to, oh, okay, this wasn't considered and this needs to be modified. So it was very much in an advisory capacity over fiscal year 22. We also had a lot of external audits going on still. Those I reported in March have slowed down a lot. In fact, we only have 2 new ones since then. We previously would maybe budget about and spend about 5% of our time on liaison efforts. In the last 2 years, it was about 20%. So that's how much activity. Those have really, really slowed down, like I said, which gives us more time to get back to those assurance audits and testing controls. And that's reflected in our ambitious fiscal year 23 plan. So some other things from the prior year, we were doing some projects at the same time. We implemented, or were in the process of implementing updates to our audit management system. And we also received approval from the president on not only upgrading that system and moving to the cloud, but also an analytics tool that goes along with it. And that just allows us, we do our continuous audit every year where we pull in high-risk transactions and payroll, purchasing expenses in other areas. It was a pretty manual process before in the old system. We spent a lot of time last year working through Workday and figuring out how we can automate that a lot more. And pull it into this analytics that we just went live with in July. So we're pretty excited. A lot of the queries that we spent a lot of time building last year, running them through the system, we're getting a lot more bang for the buck. We can look at a lot more and then have a lot quicker output of anomalies. And then in Workday, a lot of support is in that system, which saves a lot of time also for the auditors because we still have to go to the department and ask for benefit support. So positive things that are moving forward, and as the controls are improved from external audit communication, from the financial statement and from other auditors, the federal audits and the statewide single audit, when issues come up and things are improved, it's positive going forward. So the other biggie is that I still have not filled my IT auditor position. We have reposted that 3 times now. But as of last week, I do have 2 candidates that have come in. And we have some leadership in the IT area that have offered to help vet the candidates. And we're hoping that within the next couple of months, we will be able to fill that position. Did have to do some kind of stopgap measures to get some of these IT areas addressed. And also you'll see that there's some IT areas in this year 23, cybersecurity continues to be a very high risk. I was able to get the retired IT auditor back on a project basis. And so he's got great familiarity with WSU, and he was able, and we have relationships, he was able to jump right in. He's on essentially an hourly project, 0.25 FTE, but I'm really getting about equivalent of what I would before 0.6 FTE. And the reason I say that is he is only working on that project. He's not doing admin, IT admin support, which is what he was doing with our audit management system. It's in the cloud. Well, we have a contract for that. He is not doing advisory. He's not doing other audits. He is just on this project. And that project is a big, it was a big wish list item. It is a continuous audit of cybersecurity controls. And so a lot of the past IT audits that we had, and then from the results of the IT office doing a very robust risk assessment and continued conversation with IT community members, where are the high risk areas in this space? And he's building a program to and a collaboration to work between the systems and have automated tests on those high low-hanging fruit, starting with, but those high-risk cybersecurity controls. And so we're, he's active on it, and it's, but he's got a timeline to get that complete, and it's a very defined project. So we have him, and then we'll have an IT auditor, hopefully, with these candidates that come in. I did have another auditor.
Remote.
I'm sorry.
Candidates, are you willing to hire remote for those candidates? Because that's the only way I've seen.
That is the only way. It is a huge talking with peers. It's an industry issue, you know, across the board everywhere, but in IT audit, a lot of my colleagues, they just can't find somebody. Have to be creative. Yeah, and I did, when I reposted it, I had to modify some of the posting. So one of the candidates is on one of the other campuses. So, you know, and that, yeah, that's a potential. So we will see some progress in that area. I did have another auditor leave last month, went to the foundation. So that's another posting that we're putting out next week, actually, to fill that position. But with our efforts and the investment that has been made, we've revamped a lot of our audit methodology, using those systems, using the technology and the relationships to, again, back to getting more bang for the buck, looking at more, but using the data and getting skill sets on board to be able to do that. And we do not see that things will change anytime soon in the next several years of being able to like quadruple our size. I don't think that will ever happen. We just need to learn to work and address the highest risk with the assets that we have. And the biggest way is what we're doing right now with that continuous model, and also getting those skill sets on board for data. I'm hoping students in the springtime, especially, I can't wait for the cybersecurity program to come up, but pulling from different sources and not just the accounting department for our interns.
we've had really good luck with interns in the past. You have also the exit report for the statewide single audit. There were 2 findings on this. The statewide, so the state auditor's office does the statewide single audit. It is at the state level. They audit Washington State audit or financial statement, which is the schedule of expenditure of financial awards, because we're a state agency. Our federal programs are rolled into that CFA report, and they audit it all. And they pick the ones that are material to get on their end, the biggest thing for that. They were here 2 years ago auditing the student financial aid cluster. They're here every 2 years. We had a finding in that one, GLBA, Ground Wage Blight Act, which is, excuse me, Information Security Risk Assessment. It was a repeat finding in fiscal year 21 when they came back and audited the entire program all over again. It's a repeat because not because management wasn't doing anything. They were very, very engaged in developing processes for the information security risk assessment to properly address it, but they wanted a quality assessment, and the product they pulled together is really a great tool and a great process. I am confident that when they come back they're here now, for the fiscal year 22 audit, they're again auditing student financial aid cluster and looking at GLBA again, and this time we will have resolution on that issue 2 years in a row finding. There was another finding in Perkins loan, and I think a lot of that was due to that transition and change in staffing and a little bit of an oversight issue, but that one will be resolved coming forward. This year's single audit, the exit document that you have is required communication, but the auditors for the single audit do not require, they don't have to come here in person to talk to the board because they're talking to at a state level. That was the financial statement that they issued the opinion on. So this exit document serves as the communication. When we have on the next audit, where there's an accountability audit of fiscal year 20 and 21, there will be an entrance document that will be shared with the board as well. So you can see the scope of that particular audit. And then the last thing is on that single audit, the scope is including the research and development cluster, which has not been audited by the state since 2015. So we anticipate this, there'll be a deep dive on that one. And then quickly on the fiscal year 23 audit report, as I mentioned, is pretty ambitious. I do anticipate we already have 5 of the audits engaged, and have been making with my smaller team some headway on that. We have changed up our audit process in the last couple of years, taking advantage of the changes that everybody had gone through. And we're kind of on a 6-month, even though it's a 1-year plan. We're on a 6-month evaluation and go back and do kind of a constant assessment of risk, evaluating from the ERM, from the IT risk assessment, other risk assessments that are done across the university. We have the audits that we've started already, the rest that are on the audit plan, and then other audit areas that are identified in the risk pool but not in the audit schedule. Those will be reevaluated at that 6 months to see if there needs to be reprioritization to address more timely the risks and include them in the audit schedule. So by our next meeting, I will have a couple of audit reports ready for you to see how I do.
Thank you, Heather. I know it was a lot. I asked you to do so much in a short period of time. I think there's really good insight in the report. It's 4:24. I have multiple agenda items left to continue to go through. I would encourage you, if you have questions of Heather makes herself available, please ask them. Is there anything that would benefit the entire board that you feel compelled to ask that we should pause and ask right now? Thank you, Heather.
All right. Again, we appreciate the one picture.
Thank you. Des is helping me to make some adjustments, given I have 6 minutes left in the meeting. Charles, thank you for moving your presentation to November. I don't want to cut that time. I think this is a critical component, and it pairs with the work that Heather's doing in the audit with our compliance and risk. So we're going to move that entire Chief Compliance Officer update to November. We are going to continue with 5 and 6, but I think we have a little bit of a shift in terms of what we'll focus on. So if you don't mind heading on up, Colleen, I think we'll do as much as we can, but let's prioritize a bit and maybe go a little deeper in November around some of this as we get closer to the legislative session.
So I think I'll just start with an overview. This was approved under delegated authority in May, and then we had our August meeting where you saw all of this. In that meeting, it took about an hour to really just focus only on this. So we've got compensation as number one. We talked about nursing accreditation salaries, the 2 new degree programs, social work and public health. If there are questions, Craig Parks has been part of the group. I asked him to come here. Ruckel's House we talked about, as well as 6 and 7. Number 1A, which is the compensation, which comprises most of the legislative ask for the biennial budget. That said, at least a 3% compensation increase, and that had the biggest variability. And so I thought I would ask Colleen and or Matt to talk about where we landed for that, because that has been updated since August.
Sure, so let me just give a little.
You have to speak
really loud when calling. Sure.
So thanks, everybody, and thanks, Provost Chilton. So just to give a little bit of background, we are hitting send on the decision packages on Tuesday. So that's when our budget office will formally transmit to the Office of Financial Management our requests. So what Regent Shower was saying with respect to November, we do not do our legislative agenda until November. We do it in a time period immediately after the elections in the event there's anything that we need to pay attention to, which has happened previously. And then we will bring that to you as an informational item. So we can talk about these in greater depth at that time. That also is the framework where we talk about who our stakeholders are, what our support looks like, what our message is from a policy perspective. The most important thing for us to talk about today is compensation. So what we have decided, and the decision was made yesterday, is that we are going to do a 4 and 3. So we're going to ask for 4% in the first year of the biennium and a 3% in the second year of the biennium. So we have done this and made these decisions working collaboratively with our partners in the higher ed sector. We are in alignment with the University of Washington, also paying attention to what the governor's conversations look like with other entities that are doing collective bargaining or bargaining agreements. Our understanding is that the governor is very interested in doing a large investment to compensation this biennial, and we are very eager to participate in that. So the number that we are asking for is 34.5 million for the biennium. That is 100% we're asking for to be fully funded from a state appropriation for compensation increase. So, and then this is where we get to the complicated part. That means we will need to work with the governor's office and with the legislature on the underlying formula so that we get fully funded. So we want the increase, but the biennium to be fully funded. What that looks like in terms of formula funding, foundation funding, or one-time funding, we don't know that. We will be continuing to work on that, and I would imagine that we will have information on that in the fall.
Can I ask a question? So to make it correctly, you're asking for 100% funding, which means the university would not have to match that. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, so if we can, I'll explain it as best I can, and I do have notes. The way that the current tuition assumption, the way that the current formula, the assumption is that we pay part of a compensation increase with tuition.
Right.
It's the funding formula, and so the governor will authorize us to do a compensation increase, and then it's not fully funded, which can create some confusion. Okay. We are requesting a compensation increase to support inflation at 4% for the first year of the biennium and 3% for the second year of the biennium.
Is that 100% first year and second year?
Yes.
The whole
kit and
caboodle.
Yep.
Wow. Do that.
Well, and this is subtle, but as Colleen said, there is some interest perhaps at the state level of doing something bigger. So we're including in our description of the request what 1% extra per year would cost. Because and requesting that they do the same thing, at least the same amount as the rest of statewide government. So there's probably going to be a lot of discussions during the session, I suspect.
Keeping in mind that we have not had a fully funded compensation increase in many years, and inflation is far beyond 4% or 3%. This will be the single biggest ask we have.
That is outstanding, because I
Awesome.
know we've
Got
like
it.
been back and forth, like,
Yeah.
what's the number? And so, wow. Questions? This is a big piece.
What is our projection of our state revenue coffers this year? Do we have an idea? Is the state looking good?
The state is looking good. So the last revenue forecast was down a little bit from
Yeah.
previous revenue forecasts, but all of the revenue forecasts have been projecting, still trending upward, and the collections have exceeded the revenue. And we can provide those, we can provide an update on that. And you can also subscribe to the government relations blog where we do updates on the revenue forecast whenever they come out. We can make sure to send that information.
That would be great. If you
Very
send that
exciting.
link, so we could all sign up.
Oh,
for
we would love that.
Why don't you just subscribe us?
We will do that.
There you go.
Great.
I don't think we've
Because
ever
we do updates on-
received an opportunity to subscribe, so.
We will do
should have that
updates. We do updates on all of the things that touch federal or state government.
That would be useful.
Yeah, so we can definitely do that.
I just go back to single biggest ask, number one priority, again, whatever this board, us as individuals can do to support this. I mean, I just think this is a really big deal, and it's important to our faculty and to the overall health and future of our university. So whatever you can do to engage us, call on us, and activate us.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to it. This is what I said last time. I'm still doing it. When I walk Trixie, this is what I'm thinking about, is how
Well, we
get
knew
the
how to do it when
finish
you did a
line.
medical school, and we've done it with buildings, so
Yeah.
let's do it,
With
let's
this, with
demonstrate
people.
it with people.
With people, absolutely. And that's how we're talking, that's what we want to talk about at the legislative agenda. We are working, Phil and I are working with our Office of Public Affairs and how we communicate it, but it's about investing in people, absolutely.
Well, I would think it's a great alignment with our partners at the UW, that sometimes we're in competition indirectly, because we're, fighting for the same dollars for buildings, but it's different when you're doing it for people.
Just a question, when we get something like this, that's been costly, is it back to strategic plan and how we budget and all of that? Is this money that just gets peanut buttered, or is this money that we can allocate along the lines that we think makes sense strategically?
I guess what I would say is, and Kirk talked about this a little bit, that, once we know what that number is, if we don't get the full, if we say get 2.5 or something like
So
that,
we get it
then
all, so we get even more than
we got it all,
that.
then what we would do is work with the faculty senate in the faculty manual, and I know this is also for staff, but for faculty senate, the salary, we have a shared governance document that it really indicates that how you do across the board, how you do merit, how you do equity. We've been revising an equity salary assessment this year with our own money, and we would build on that, as well as look at how to adjust the merit increases as well. So I would say, now Kirk, tell me if you agree, that we would do some across the board, and then we would use some increment to do more in terms of merit and equity.
But you can't do it for, say, new faculty.
We would have to make sure we were doing it equitably. Sometimes we've got faculty who've been there a long time who haven't had a raise in so long. We don't want to create inequity by the way we go.
The only thing I was going to add, which is not any, it's just added to it, is the language that we use to OFM allows us the flexibility to do that. And part of the language that we use in talking to the governor's office and the policymakers is that if they fully fund, or when they fully fund, this ask that does allow us to do this. That's a huge component of this. That we know that there are structural issues within the university that have happened over time, and having this type of an investment allows us to do that. It's a really important piece of our conversation with the state.
Yeah, there's so many parameters to this. I mean, you have salary compression problems, you even have salary inversion problems. So this would be a complex problem that the provost office, the president's office, I'm sure would list.
At our November meeting, we're going to spend some of that strategic time on compensation philosophy, and we're going to map out a lot of the stuff so the board has some sense of not exactly how we distribute 4%, some of the programs we're doing, what we're trying to do and accomplish. So there'll be plenty of time to sort of discuss that. As I mentioned, the faculty senate leadership, our goal right now is to get the maximum amount that we can, and we can worry about the internal distribution mechanism, you know, as we move forward, but that's really, so
Right.
Heather, the idea is, no, we don't peanut butter the whole thing. We do it strategically, but my experience, if it's less than 3%, you wind up making people angrier about giving some people 2.5 and 2.6, and you wind up doing these little incremental amounts, and you say, we'd be better off at that point simply providing a cost of living increase and not trying to differentiate. So getting up to 4% plus some of the equity money that we've set aside means that you can start making some bigger adjustments.
Yeah, good.
And Kirk and Elizabeth have been great in the discussions with faculty senate.
Yeah, yeah, you know, if we go back to land grant and we go back to serving students and we go back to equity lens, with those two things in mind, then, you know, then I think you center it appropriately.
One other question I have around, we just, you know, we were looking at enrollment numbers this morning, enrollment's down. We know that the cost of university is a barrier for many. So, I mean, I have an expectation that our governor and our state lean in here a little bit so that we don't put this, you know, that it doesn't come back to say, we'll put it in, embedded in your tuition. And I think those need to be clear messages from our university of, we need our state to kind of come in line with us here and help so that we're not doing this on the backs of students.
Yeah, Governor Inslee, I want to compare to Governor Inslee and his office. We've had very good meetings with him. This is a structural problem for us that originated in the recession. And what has happened is, as we have with all structural problems, is that we came to a place, I would say, over the past 4 years where the structure does not work. And so Governor Inslee's office, they have made progress on this pretty significantly last year in the supplemental, but also in the biennial. And so we want to continue to move forward with that. And we have every signal we've had from him, from his office, is that he's very interested in compensation and understands how important that is. So we would be addressing a problem that is, you know, over a decade long. A huge deal, huge deal.
Okay, good. Thank you. We have a capital budget request. Do we need to talk about that now, or is that something that we can talk about in November? Pauline, sorry.
Well, I believe it's been approved by the board already, so this is.
So it's just, it was an informational,
information.
right, the state capital budget request. Sorry.
I think
It
we're
has
good.
not, it has
We're
not
good.
changed.
Okay,
It's not.
we're fine.
Capital has not changed from May or
Okay.
from,
Thank you, Olivia, for being ready to jump up. All right. Okay, information item number 7, Matt, still here, so it's a combination of Nathan and.
Right, there's 3 items under number 7. The bottom 2 are the foundation operating agreement and our alumni association operating agreement. Those were approved on delegated authority. It's there really for information. There's nothing really controversial there. That's a fairly routine matter. It's important that we weigh these and do these every couple of years. The first item on there is the tuition differential for the Masters of Health Administration leadership. That did not make it onto the regular agenda the way it needed to. And so what we did is we utilized the fact that that could be done by the Executive Governance Committee. So I don't know that there's need to discuss either of those that much. I think I just want people to be aware that that's there.
Okay. Comments, questions? Clearly, this is a packed agenda every time. I appreciate your patience as we went through this. There was a lot to cover. We will continue the discussion around the legislative priorities, and we will have our report from the Chief Compliance Officer in November. I think at this point, we've covered everything that we needed to, and I will turn the meeting back over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Regent Showers. Thank you, everybody. Is it possible to take 5 minutes? Okay.
It better be.
I just think everybody needs a moment, right? So we're gonna break for 5 minutes. We will return, please return, and upon our return, we will then go formally into executive session, which I will announce formally at that time.
Yeah, no, you were.
Yes, to see you too.
I was gonna say, he doesn't know about the questions yet. We don't know what the issue is, so we don't know what the questions are.
Right, we are back in session at this time. I would like to announce that the Regents will now hold an executive session to discuss with legal counsel litigation or potential litigation in which the university is or could be a party. The session will be closed. The executive session will conclude at approximately 5:30 p.m. unless it is extended by further announcement. If any action is taken as a result of these discussions, it will be taken tomorrow during open session. Immediately following the executive session, the meeting will adjourn. Thank you. Just for the
now we're good.
Right, thank you very much. Thank you for a great day. We will be reconvening tomorrow morning as a board, and that meeting will begin at 9 a.m. in the Lighting Student Services Room, 405 Pullman, Washington. Is that this room? Yes, that is this room. We will be back here. And thanks for great discussion.